Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me this morning on Wednesday Rally. And I'm super excited today because we have a two-part call. We have Brooke and Molly both here from FInest City Escrow, and we're super excited about that. And then we have Stephen, who's going to be talking to us about our insurance in California and how crazy that all is and what it means for agents and how they really need to pay attention to this before they get, deals in escrow, and then we find out how expensive it all is and they fall out. So welcome, everybody. Cool. Molly, why don't you and Brooke kind of go first? And we just want to talk about kind of what escrow is. We have some newer agents on the call and we want to discuss like what it means to be an escrow and how it all goes.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll go ahead and kick this off and then I'm going to hand it over to Brooke because she's truly the expert. So I'm the sales rep over here at FInest City Escrow. My job is just to ensure that you have great customer service while you're working with us and add in all the extra.
Molly's cutting out.
Yeah. Oh, am I cutting out? Can you guys?
A little bit.
You're better now.
Yes, now you're
there
good.
We go. Sorry about that. I would wiggle over to the side and then it all goes to crap. Brooke has been doing escrow for 20 years and her partner's been doing it for about 20 years as well. So she knows all the tips, tricks. She's seen everything in the trade. So Brooke, we have a couple questions for you that we sent last night. Can we just run down those and give our team a little bit of info about all the escrow process?
Yeah, absolutely. Hang on just one second.
Cool. I also wrote down a couple of questions.
Sorry about that.
Extra questions. Good. No, good. You're good.
Oh, good. Okay, so I've got the questions from yesterday. So I will touch on those. And then Shelly, do you want to jump in once I'm done? And if anybody has questions as we go through, I know I don't want to take up too much of your time. So I'll just do kind of a brief overview if I can.
Great.
Thanks, Molly, for the intro. Thanks, Shelly, for having us here. Super excited about that. And we're really grateful for the opportunity. So if I look away, I've just got my notes over here just because I want to make sure I touch on everything. So the life of an escrow broken down. So basically our role is we're that neutral third party. So we hold money, we hold the deed, we hold all of those documents until we actually have everything in a file that can complete an escrow closing. So you open escrow, the buyer submits earnest money, we hold that earnest money, and then we prepare our escrow instructions that are going to mimic the purchase contract, and then we send those out for signature. If it's a cash transaction, the process is a little bit easier because you're not waiting on that additional third party. If there is a loan involved, then we work in the background with that lender to make sure the lender has everything they need to be able to close on time. Ideally, we get loan documents within 3 days or so before closing. Doesn't always happen. We try our best. They try our best. There's a lot of moving parts and variables that can kind of create delays or make sure you either close on time or you don't. In between, we're also going through that title report that comes from the title company to make sure that we clear all liens, to make sure that the buyer gets clear title to the property. And if there is a loan, that lender is in what we call first lien position, meaning they're the first and only lien on the property, or if there are multiple liens, that they're the first lien position. Does that make sense?
100%. Yep.
Good. Okay, great. So then at that point, once we get those loan documents, the buyer signs, we process everything on our end. We package to the lender, we package to title, and then we send out for recording. And then we just wait on the county to let us know that we're confirmed. And then we let our agents know so that then they can pass on the good news to their buyer or seller. After that, typically speaking, it's 1 business day until we can disperse the file. Meaning the important part, agents get paid, sellers get their money. So that's that disbursement. And the reason that 1 day delay happens is because a lot of times, so the county will record all day long, but a lot of times we don't get that recording confirmation until after the Federal Reserve wire cutoff time. And that's the sticky part, because I know that, in all of this, of course, being able to take possession of the property is super important to buyers. But the other important part is the seller says, okay, I've given my home to this person. Where's my money? Right. And so I want to kind of touch on why there's a delay with that. Again, we get that recording confirmation after the wire cutoff time, which means that title typically can't wire to us until the next business day. So once we get that wire, we process it as quickly as possible so we can make sure everybody gets paid as quickly as possible.
I think that's awesome. And I had a closing once where I had my buyers in the moving truck on the street, and they wanted to, you know, they were asking me, can't we get in? Can't we get in? They've already moved out. I'm like, nope, not until we
Yeah.
have confirmation. I cannot give you the keys.
You're exactly right. And that's, that happens a lot, right? And I get that it's very emotional, it's very stressful, but it's a lot of liability on you, the buyer, and the seller because there are insurances in place. The seller probably still has their insurance in place. And I see Stephen nodding, so I know he can touch on this, but that's a really big deal because, from an insurance standpoint, and I'm going to stay in my wheelhouse here. But with those liabilities, if something were to happen, the buyer breaks their ankle moving in, that's on the seller's insurance, I believe. I see
Mhm.
Stephen nodding, so I'm hoping that's correct. So I'll leave that to the expert, but that's where I'm just going to come in and say it's a lot of liability. And I know it's emotional, but this is where, as an agent, it's hard, but you kind of have to stick to your guns and make sure you're protecting your client there and yourself.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And I think it's also important to note, and you did, that you guys are only going off the instructions that are on the purchase contract and any addenda that gets happening in between the transactions. So agents need to realize that you don't know that, on the side, maybe the buyer and seller had negotiated a credit or something, but it's not on an addendum. So you have no idea
Yes.
knowing that. So we need to always be making sure that we're letting you know all those things.
Thank you. And I love that you touched on that because that's one of the points that I was going to, address later. But that's the thing is I like to think I'm very important, but I'm really just a paper pusher and instruction taker. So we're only as good as the information you get, just as you are. And so you're exactly right. If there are addenda out there that we don't have, we don't know that. And it's so important that we get that early or ahead of time, or even if it's in the works and not fully signed, that way we can communicate credits to the lender, those sorts of things. So you're exactly right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Good, good.
Perfect.
All right,
Do you want me to
cool.
hop on to the next one?
Yes, please.
Okay, so how to read a closing statement. Basically, it's just debits and credits. My computer just went dark here. So it's debits and credits. So you're going to read it and there's going to be two columns. You're going to have a column with debits, which is charges to your client, and then a column with credits, which is credits to your client, such as a credit from commission or a credit from the seller or something like that. And then at the very bottom of that statement, you're just going to see a bottom line. And so all of those receipts or credits, things that are going to be in the credit column would be, let's say you're representing a buyer, that's going to be their earnest money, it's going to be their loan amount, and then again, any commission credits or credits from the seller. So those are all going to add up basically for their benefit or in their favor. And then the debits are going to be the charges. So you're going to see title and escrow fees. You're going to see any other costs, whether, it's negotiated in the contract that they pay the home warranty maybe, or they pay termite, those sorts of things. And at the very bottom, you should balance to the penny. So all of your receipts or credits should be the same as all of those charges. And then you'll kind of see what's going to look like a zero out at the bottom.
That's great. And it's important for agents to know that they need to look at that too. They can't just
Yes.
expect that everything's going to be perfect on there, or that their TC is going to look through it and catch it. So I think a lot of times agents don't go through those with a fine tooth comb and make sure that everything is balanced to the penny. So
I
great.
love that. And that's a great point is so typically once we get those loan documents, we'll email those estimates out to the buyer's agent and the seller's agent and say, loan docs are in, buyer's signing this afternoon or whatever it is. Please take a look at this and review for any missing credits, any missing prorations, anything like that that may be a little bit out of the ordinary. That's your opportunity to make sure that everything looks right. Because once we're closed, we can't do anything about it. If there's a credit that's missed or something like that, the lender's funded and we just can't add it at that point, right? And so then your buyer leaves money on the table or something like that.
Right.
All right.
What is so can someone use escrow for escrow and title, or do they have to be separate?
So I recommend that it's separate. Recommend that it's separate for a couple of different reasons. You've got two different parties, and that can get a little bit overwhelming. But typically speaking, the client, whether it's buyer or seller, doesn't really communicate with title anyway. We're going to be that kind of main communication. So adding that additional vendor in isn't going to make a huge difference. The other thing with that is, as an independent escrow company, we have different certifications that title company escrow side don't necessarily have to have. Those are SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3 certifications. And so it's an added layer of protection for your clients that those title company on the escrow side, they're not required to have.
Oh, well, that's good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you touched on everything that I had questions about. Does anyone else have any questions? Nope.
No, I will add in, Shelly. When you guys are selecting your escrow company, it's truly important that you're working with a neutral third party, even when you're on the buy side. So remember to fight for your affiliates, fight for the people that are protecting your clients, because like Brooke mentioned, with that extra certification and that extra level of security for your clients, especially when you're on the buy side, the money is going to us. It's your client's money. So you want that money to be secure. You don't want to have hiccups throughout the transaction. If you're working through another escrow company that say has only been around for a couple months or doesn't have a large backing behind them, with all the financial instability right now and the instability in the market in general, a lot of these escrow companies are going to be gone. So making sure that you're fighting for affiliates that have great backing, that have that extra security for your clients, and that you know and worked with before. It's a great way to ensure that your transaction goes smoothly and you get more referrals from your clients in the future.
Yes, that's a great point, Molly. And I do always try to do that when I have buyers, but usually nine
Doesn't always work that
out
way.
of 10. Yeah, the
Well,
seller
that's a good.
like, nope.
That's what I was going to ask Molly. Do you have any suggestions or any tactics that have been effective for agents on the buy side to be able to direct escrow? Because when I came from Arizona, the buyers always directed the title and escrow. Now it's all in one office over there. But here it was like this unilateral rule that the sellers are, directing title and escrow. Do you have agents that you have found a successful way to be able to maneuver that past the listing agent?
One of the things that I always recommend for our agents to do is to always say, I will work with your escrow company as long as they're SOC 1, 2, and 3 certified. It's really important for my clients that we have that level of security. My escrow company does. Can you please show me proof that your escrow company has SOC 1, 2, and 3 certification? Now,
What's it called? SOC 1?
SOC 1, 2, and 3. I'll send you the verbiage for it as well.
I love that.
But just to ask for that extra level of security, because I'm not saying we're the only escrow company that has it. I'm not saying we're the best escrow company, although we are. I'm just saying protect your clients the best that you can so you can ensure that your transaction gets closed and the money doesn't end up in Dubai halfway through the transaction.
Right.
Can I hop in on there really quick too? One of the things that we do exclusively is we never, ever, ever email wire instructions, period, end of story. Like that is a non-negotiable. And there are still escrow companies out there that will email wire instructions, even unencrypted. That compromises your clients right off the bat. And so when you open an escrow and you start a transaction that way, that makes me very, very nervous. And so we just got a client on the buy side who reached out and they said, I just want to make sure that you're never going to email wire instructions. So we always do an introductory phone call where we explain the process, explain how wires work, and also explain that we will never email and what to look out for. And like I said, period, end of story, never, even if it's encrypted, because personally, I don't even always trust that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's great. That's a great extra added layer of protection. And I didn't know about these certifications. So yeah, that would be great, Molly, if you could send that verbiage out to us, because I love that. And I'm going to use that from now on when I'm fighting for my escrow and title to be on my transactions. So
I love it.
Thank
Glad we
you.
can be help. And if you guys have any additional questions, I'll put my cell phone number in the chat. You guys are able to text me 24/7. Brooke's available normal business hours, and she can answer any of the in-depth questions for you.
Great. Thank you. Have fun at the beach.
Thank you.
Lucky.
I'll be in the office in about 30. So
All
Thanks
right.
for having us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks so much. And feel free to hang on if you hang out here if you want to hear what Stephen has to say about our insurance industry as well. But thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Of course.
you.
Thanks. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.
All right, Stephen, you're up.
Great. Yeah, just to kind of touch base on what they just talked about, having all of your pieces in a row is huge. And I see Dean's on this call too. So Dean plays a role in this big time as well, especially with what's going on in the industry, not just mine, yours, all of us. It's not pretty right now. But knowing who you're working with, knowing the companies that are still around, knowing the geography, the area, everything. So you guys just talked about the process of escrow, but there's also a process of what the realtor does, finding the home for the client or listing the home for a client, finding that buyer, finding that seller, going to Dean to get pre-qualified for your buyer or seller. A lot of times insurance is the afterthought. And I have an example that literally just came across my desk 30 seconds ago, and I can show it to you guys in a second here. But we get everybody ready to go, and then insurance is last minute. Let's just slam it through and get it done. We can't do that anymore, unfortunately. Most of you probably know already that a lot of carriers have already left the state of California at this point. There's limitations on what areas we can write. Pricing has now shot through the roof, and it's affecting a lot of deals, and it's going to affect more deals going forward because it's going to get tougher and tougher. This isn't going to change for probably, I would say, a year, 18 months at the earliest. And not just that, what essentially is happening is it's creating a new floor for the entire insurance industry. Floor meaning pricing floor. We were used to realtors or mortgage brokers would tend to throw out, yeah, $100 a month for insurance. Just pencil that into the escrow docs, and that's what we're going to go with. And now we're seeing $300, $400, $500, $600, $800 a month in some cases, depending on the size of the property and the locations. A lot of carriers have stopped writing condo policies. So if you're a realtor out there shopping for condos for your clients, just buyer beware. It's tougher and tougher to find carriers that will write condos now.
Wow.
And part of that is because the master HOA policies that insure the buildings of those condos are getting non-renewed. So those associations are losing their insurance. And if that's the case, they've got to change their CCNRs and all of their rules to make sure that the onus of the property goes now back onto that buyer and not the HOA in total. So we've seen some here in Rancho Bernardo, some HOAs go from $140,000 in a premium for the year that is split amongst the owners to 1.4 million a year. So now all of those homeowners are being assessed, random fees of $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to make up that difference when they weren't expecting that, prepared for that, any of those things. So what I like to coach realtors and even mortgage brokers on is pre-qualify your buyers, pre-qualify your homes, and pre-qualify your listings. So you are always going to send somebody to Dean to see what they can afford before you go in and just throw out an offer. You got to pre-qualify that house now too. Whether, like I said, whether you're buying or whether you're selling that house. Because oftentimes if you're the realtor, you're looking for any deal you can get. And if you just get somebody who wants to give you their listing and you just jump to it, and then you get through the process and halfway through you find out that they've had 3 water losses on that house over the last 5 years, and that house is uninsurable, and now that's going to blow up the deal, or it's in a high fire zone, or it's just so expensive that buyers just get turned away. You don't want to get yourself set up and just blow the deal or look bad to that client when you could have been the professional at the beginning of it and say, look, this is where you're going to have issues. Either we should wait to sell or you got to do something different. Maybe let's list this as a rental instead, and then you can at least get some funding there from a new tenant. But when it comes to the insurance side, oftentimes what we rate things on, there's 3 major factors. And it's I'm with Farmers Insurance. So my first and foremost, I have to go to Farmers for all of our business. If Farmers won't write it, I can go to other places. So currently we're one of the only carriers in the market still writing insurance. State Farm is out, Allstate's out. AAA is still writing, so they're a competitor right now that's doing well, but they still have areas where they won't write at all. But we all kind of use a similar thing. We use a fire line score or some sort of wildfire hazard scoring system. And it's usually based off of 3 factors. It's based off of slope. And by slope, I mean how the house sits. Is it on a hillside? Is it on a flat level plane? Or is there a slope around it? Because as we all knew growing up, heat travels up, fire goes uphill. So what kind of slope is it on? And not just for that heat rising up, but when it's on a slope, it's harder to fight a fire. It's harder to get emergency people there to fight a fire when it's on a hillside. Second is access. How easy is it to get to the house? Is it on the front of the street? Is it on a cul-de-sac? Is it one way in and one way out? There's areas that are like, I'll give you an example in Scripps Ranch. A lot of Scripps Ranch it's built on like a finger. All the streets, there's one main entry point, and then there's all these little fingers that go to those streets. Those are all one way in and one way out issues. And then the last one is brush. So what is the brush around that house? And it's not just around that direct property line. It's a 1/4 mile radius of those homes. So it's a big swath of an area that you got to look for. And depending on what that score is going to generate what that premium is. The second biggest factor that's coming into the industry now is the cost to rebuild. Inflation has, created a monster at this point. And it's not just inflation of goods. It's not just the wood issues. It's a lot of those things. It's wood, it's gas. People don't realize why gas is affecting these costs, but you got to get those construction workers there somehow to build these things. And then labor costs for those construction workers or service plumbers, electricians, all of their hourly rates have shot through the roof as well to maintain what they need to do. So that plays into what we insure the house for. So there's always a misconception when it comes to insurance that, hey, I'm buying $1 million house, I need $1 million insurance policy. That's not the case in most cases. So there's a difference. There's market value, and then there's reconstruction value. So we're looking at what it costs to rebuild the home. Dean cares about what it costs to give the loan out, what it costs to buy the home. So oftentimes you're going to see, especially in San Diego now, we're all here, most homes are $1 million. I'm looking at a home right now. It's $1 million home, but it's 1,700 square feet.
Yeah.
It's not going to cost $1 million to build that 1,700 square foot house. That being said, 5, 7, 10 years ago, we were seeing averages between $185 to $285 per square foot to rebuild a house. Now we're starting at $300 a square foot to build a house, all the way up to $600 or $700, depending on the finishes and the features and where it's located. So what am I getting at? All of that plays into what these costs are. And now, not to throw Dean under the bus, but he can kind of chime in on this part, but with interest rates where they're at this point as well, that adding to the cost, to the DTI scores that these people have to qualify at, we're running into some issues because they need to get this insurance cost to a certain number.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you want to tap into that at all, Dean, but
Yeah.
or
So
explain what that is.
I can use myself as an example. So last year my insurance was $1,600. I just got my renewal, and it's 27, almost 2,800.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a basic track home.
Yep.
And then to tap in also about the DTI, yeah, that's one thing that you got to be aware of, because you mentioned $100 a month. I'm not estimating 100, but I'm like at $300 a month,
because that's where we have to be at this point. So you got to factor that into what your clients can actually afford too when you're looking at purchasing these homes.
And then I just closed one up in Alpine.
Yeah.
And kind of funny that the realtor was former insurance agent. I know you know him, Steve.
Yep.
And anyway, so I get the offer in and I call him. I said, hey, we got to look at insurance. He goes, oh, I'm one step ahead of you, buddy. He already had a quote.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because he's a former insurance guy, but that's one of the things that I talk to my clients about, like right up front, like, all right, once you secure a property, you got to start shopping for insurance right away. And
so I'd even go a step further with that, Dean, with the realtors themselves. So usually what I'm telling realtors is, before you even put an offer in, send me the address. Before you go and sign that listing agreement, send me the address. I can shop it. I can just look with our company, and we're a pretty good barometer of if it's going to be acceptable or not. And not just that, what the pricing kind of a ballpark range is. So Shelly, I don't know if I can share my screen real quick.
Let me make sure.
It looks like I can.
Okay, yeah. Try it.
I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is a home that this buyer's been blocked out of 4 different other properties that she's been trying to buy. And the realtor and the mortgage broker just sent me this, hey, we need insurance ASAP. And I went, okay, let me get in the system first.
Oh, man.
First thing I see is, they send me, it's just, a regular house, looks great, right? Looks great from the outside, but then I go 4 pictures down, not just a slope. I mean, we're looking at canyons.
Right.
So why is that an issue? It's that slope issue. And how, if a fire starts on this area back over here, it's going to come down the canyon and right back up to this house. And there's no access point for any emergency services to get down here other than a helicopter to drop, water. Those are the issues that a lot of realtors don't factor in because they're just trying to get their client a property. But you got to look at these things. So now in this situation, no insurance company is going to take this straight off. Just like Dean just said with Alpine, it's not going to be a one policy situation. So there's companies out there. We have to end up going through what's called, I'm sure you guys are aware, but the California Fair Plan. So what that is the California Fair Plan will insure a home. It's the last resort, but they'll insure a home just for losses that are caused by a fire. Then you have to get a second policy with a Farmers, with a AAA or some other carrier out there that will write everything else. So it'll cover all of your personal property, all your liability, all of your theft, all due to causes other than fire. So water damage, wind damage, those types of things. But now you've got two separate policies that have to go into escrow, that have to get approved, that have to get into this right pricing for that loan so they can afford all of these things to close escrow. And the problem there is once you get involved with a property that needs a fair plan policy, the California Fair Plan requires pictures of the property prior to being approved. And not just, I can't just go and screenshot these pictures from Zillow. They have to be time stamped and dated that show the property address in the picture to prove that it's that specific property, because there's brokers out there that will just throw up some sort of picture that has nothing to do with that property just to get approvals on these things. And because these insurance carriers have left the market so much, now the California Fair Plan has been flooded with new applications. So now they're backdated 5 to 7 business days on getting quotes back to us. So all of this plays into that role of, how much time you have in escrow to get it closed. A lot of times they want a 21-day escrow or they want a 30-day escrow. We don't have that kind of time anymore to wait. So we have to get that before you even start escrow. And this is, constantly changing. So within the last 30 days, we've changed some of our limitations as well. Starting in July, now Farmers will only write 7,000 new homeowner policies a month. So when we get notified daily of where our numbers are at. So in July, we didn't hit that 7,000 number until July 27th. So the problem there was 28th, 29th, 30th, we couldn't close any properties. So they couldn't close escrow on those days. They had to wait till August 1st again. Well, we just got hit again. August 1st, they announced now any high value home. So what's a high value home? Anything where the reconstruction cost is over $1.5 million. So going back to that reconstruction cost number, that $300 to $500 a square foot. So in that situation, you're looking at 3,500 to 4,000 square feet and above. So those properties now have a 25-day waiting period to get approval from Farmers. So if you're listing a house in that square footage range or that area range, just note that some companies are going to have a waiting period now. So don't go for a 21-day escrow because it won't meet that requirement. It's just every single week, month, it's just kind of unfolding. And there's new companies that are dropping out as well. Liberty Mutual's now dropping out on their commercial business, so that the personal lines could be the next one. It's just getting harder and harder. And people go, why is this happening? It's because insurance companies are just losing money. We're all a for-profit business at the end of the day, but they're all losing money. Over the last 3.5 years, the insurance commissioner in California hasn't allowed any of these companies to raise their rates to what they need. So what's happened is over those last 3 years with inflation increases, every loss that happened, every car accident that happened, every flood that happened, whatever that new cost for the wood, for the plumbing, for the used car, whatever it was, the insurance company had to foot the bill. So there's companies that have lost $2 billion in a year. State Farm announced they lost $13 billion nationwide last year. That's why they exited California, because it just became too expensive. And the rates that they needed to get to, they would have doubled, tripled, or quadrupled their homeowners rates. And the commissioner wouldn't allow that because the insurance commissioners trying to look out for the consumer. The problem is if you run out of companies to insure homes, where do we get to at this point? So I don't know where it's going, not to be doom and gloom like this conversation has been, but there's options out there. How do we fix some of this stuff? How do we get this insurance to where the client can afford it? At the end of the day, what I'm telling a lot of clients on renewals, like Dean with his going up double to what it was, is you got to look at raising your deductibles in a lot of cases, because what's happening with home insurance is kind of like what medical insurance is now today. It's more of a catastrophe plan or a hospital type plan. You're going to take a huge deductible, a $10,000, $15,000 family deductible, like a lot of people have, but it's different where you don't meet that deductible over the full year because you don't have incidents throughout the whole year for home insurance. But when you have that major incident, that's what you want to use your insurance for. It's not meant as a maintenance plan because, a couple of shingles broke off the roof or the toilet leaked right over the floor that I can, dry out myself or get somebody to come and fix. A lot of these situations it has to be some major situation that's going to cause a huge amount of damage to your home. Unfortunately, that's the way insurance is getting to, because you don't want to risk filing a claim and then losing that insurance or the rate going up even higher. So with Dean's situation, if he had filed a claim, it might have gone, instead of 2,700, it might be 4,700 at this point. And you have to play the game. You have to look at the numbers and go, does it make sense to file this claim knowing what the rates are going to go to versus what this would cost for me to do it on my own? I hate saying it, but my generation and the generation behind me, they don't know how to maintain homes. They weren't taught how to do anything for themselves for the most part, unfortunately. So they think everything that happens or breaks, somebody needs to come and fix it for me. There's no, there's no accountability there anymore, where that hopefully that changes, but maybe this is the cause that will change it at this point, that you're on your own for a lot of these things.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that too, because I have a client who just had a major leak and they had to tear up the floor.
Yep.
And they were trying to decide if they should turn it in.
Yeah.
And I said to them exactly that. If this is something you think you can take care of on your own, then don't turn it in. Yeah.
The hard part there, and not, hold on, I'm going to stop the share here so I can get you guys back on my screen here. So the hard part there is every company is a little bit different, but most companies, what's going to happen is you usually have a 30 to 35% rate increase over a 3-year period. So let's just say your insurance premium's $1,000. You file a claim, you have $1,000 deductible. You pay the first $1,000. The insurance company is going to pay whatever the damage is after that. But now your rate's going to go up $350 next year on top of the $1,000 you just spent. Then it'll go up another $350 and another $350. So you just have to look and say, I just spent $1,250 plus $1,000. I spent $2,250. Is this claim less than that? Then I'll take care of it myself. If it's more, is it worth me eating the increase in the insurance over the next 3 years? And then on top of that, if I have a second claim in that next 3 years, I'll probably get non-renewed. So let's debate, is this worth for such a small claim? Now with a flooring situation, depending on what the floor is or what the house is, let's say it's a 1-story house and it's got wood floors throughout. If it damages wood floors in one area, most insurance companies, if not all, it's called line of sight coverage. So if that wood floor is in my line of sight throughout the entire house, I have to replace the floor throughout that entire house. So a lot of these water claims that you would think would only be $2,000-$3,000 end up being $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 because they're replacing all of the hardwood in a house. And then when they replace all the hardwood, then they have to move out because they can't live in the house because they're losing a kitchen or a bathroom. So then the insurance company has to go pay for them to stay somewhere else on top of that. So that's where these things just grow and grow and grow. And people ask why the rates are going up, because these claims are now $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $80,000. And for an insurance company to recoup that $80,000, they're never going to recoup that from that client, from that specific premium that they're going to get from that client. It's like a casino. Insurance is high-level gambling. You have one claim, you beat the house. Pat yourself on the back. You got what you got out of it, and you won in that scenario. But you're going to have higher rates after that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We use it for something worthwhile.
Right. Right. So on the California Fair plan,
yep.
Are there limits then to what?
Yes. Great question.
There must be. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another big issue that's starting to come into play, especially because most of the homes that end up having to go to the fair plan are already higher end homes, or they're in areas where they're bigger and larger homes. So the FAIR plan has a limit right now of $3 million of total coverage. So what do I mean by that? Not just the dwelling. It's also included your personal property, your loss of use, so to go stay somewhere else, any extended replacement costs that you need to help rebuild the house, any separate structures. There's a $3 million cap there. So again, if you're in that situation where it's a 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 square foot house, because those are the homes that are often in these bigger rural areas that have issues with fire, you're going to come up to that threshold. I had one house from an EXP realtor. Is his own house, 7,000, 7,500 square feet. He chose just to, it needed more than the $3 million cap. He chose just to do the $3 million cap, and he'll self-insure for the rest, because in his opinion, if the home burned down, he would just sell the lot anyways. He would just collect the insurance money, sell the lot, and move on somewhere else, which unfortunately, that's what some people are going to have to do, because there's just so many limitations there. Now, you might be able to find some fly-by-night insurance company that might not be grade A or financially sound, but we're seeing premiums in, I don't know where everybody's located here, but in some of the areas in Poway, back in Madeiras, we're seeing premiums of 30, 40, 50, $60,000 a year just for insurance. So it's a big factor now.
Yeah. What about power lines? That doesn't come into play?
Not necessarily as much anymore, and especially with what SDG&E, as much as we despise them, what they've done to prevent fires going forward. As you guys know now, with when winds kick up to a certain mile per hour in the back country back there, they shut the power off because they're trying to avoid what happened in 07. And just a background, in 07 we had 13 total losses just in our agency. So we've worked through all of these things. We've seen it before, we'll see it again. We've got our clients back into bigger and better homes than what they were in before, but it's a process. The power lines aren't so much an issue. It's more of, like I said, how easy is it to get to the house? Certain zip codes are just off limits. And the problem is the reason why they're off limits with some companies and not others is one company might have a huge market share in that zip code already, and they're just at capacity, where another company won't. So we kind of piggyback off of each other. Like before State Farm left, they had Scripps Ranch. We were out of Scripps Ranch as farmers, but State Farm wouldn't touch Escondido. We were all in Escondido because you'd look to see what the risk factor was there. Is it worth carrying a potential $1 billion in losses in that zip code versus the other one? So we would kind of spread out the market share at that point. So that's why I said call ahead, give me an address, do what you need to do before you go and put an offer in or before you take that listing, because it can bite you, unfortunately.
I'm glad you said that about the condos, because
yeah,
I have a
condos
condo
are, it's
coming
just
up.
yeah, it's
Jeez.
rough.
Yeah.
And then not only that, if it's tenant occupied, if you're looking at investment properties, that market's starting to shrink as well as at this point too. So if somebody's looking to buy something just so they can rent out, get it to people ahead of time, because there's not as many carriers out there writing tenant occupied residences either. And the concern there is the same thing, a maintenance issue. When you've got a tenant in a property, they're not as likely to maintain the property as if it was owner occupied. So that's the concern with a lot of carriers at this point. Now, you also have a lot of vacation rentals out there now, or short-term rentals. There's not a lot of companies that have access to there's a difference in the types of policies out there for short-term rentals. The reason being is you can't just do a typical landlord policy on a short-term rental, because in most times that property sits vacant. So there's a couple different types of homeowners properties. There's owner occupied, tenant occupied, short-term rental, and then vacant. Vacant is the most expensive out of all of them, because there's nobody there to maintain it. Nobody knows if something happened while it's empty. You could have a water loss there going on for 2 weeks, and then it turns into mold, and then it turns into even grosser situations that wouldn't be covered. So they charge higher premiums for vacant properties. But these vacation rentals could sit weeks at a time before there's another tenant in there. So you have to get a separate policy for those types of purchases as well.
Interesting.
Especially these higher end luxury ones now that people are trying to go after, because there's some fun property. People are making a lot of money on vacation rentals, especially in San Diego, if they can do it the right way.
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys,
I
one
have
other
a quick
comment.
question.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, hi. Since you're talking, I'm not insurance person at all, from different
Yeah.
countries, different. But can I ask first, like, very quick personal question? I have Airstream and sun markers. Can I insurance? It's Airstream trailer. I use it as a Airbnb rental.
Depends. Some carriers allow that. So where do you park it out of?
It's parked in my friend's property. It's a 5 acres of land. So
Okay.
she owns a property, she owns a house and it just it sits on her premises.
Yeah. So
on the land.
usually an insurance like that, because it doesn't move, the Airstream's
Yeah.
not going anywhere, right? You can usually just insure that as your regular motorhome type policy and rent that out. Now, who are you renting to, or how are you leasing that out to people? Is it through a website of some sort, or
It's an app, Airbnb and VRBO.
it's all through there? So yeah, there's ways to get that insured the right way, but I don't know what type of policy you have on it now, but let me know if you want to get my contact info, or I can put it in the chat as well.
Yes, please do. I would
Yeah.
like to find out.
Yeah.
After hearing all that, thank you very much for
Of
being
course.
Yes. Yeah, put it in there, Stephen, but
Yeah.
Yulia, I'll send you Stephen's contact info.
Thank you,
So
Shelley.
you can
And
have it in
I
your phone.
love this hour. Absolutely. Very
Yeah,
informative.
Very
Thank you.
informative, right? Good. That was a great
Yes.
question
Yeah.
too
And
about your
Dean, what
place.
did you have?
Yeah, so I've got a loan I just got clear to close on, and the holdup was the HOA association.
Yeah.
And the insurance. This happened to be an error on the insurance part. They didn't have their evidence correct with the correct HOA and then the correct number of units. Held us up 4 days on our contingency.
Which could be huge.
But so as realtors, just know that there is a new Fannie Mae form that is being sent to the HOAs. It's taking them longer to complete. So so just be aware of that.
Just everything is taking longer to complete.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's what we got to get used to. So we have to get more organized, I guess, and just ahead of the game, which couldn't do anymore. Dean used to be able to call me and say, hey, I need a property done, and I would have it done in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's not the situation anymore. Yeah.
Days are gone.
Yep. What about USAA, Stephen? I imagine they're still here in San Diego. Insured.
You broke up there for a second. What did you say, Shelley?
USAA?
They're still around too, but again, they're all of us. We're all limiting certain areas, certain criteria. So they might be better on homes that are 1,500 square feet and below, but higher end homes or larger homes, they're going to shy away from. A lot of companies are doing that now. So just call around. I mean, Costco stopped writing insurance at this point. That was a big player for quite a few years. If you go on their website right now, it just says we're not writing in California. Now, they're not non-renewing their current books, but they're just not accepting anybody new. And then on the auto insurance side, if you want to switch auto insurance from another company, they're having major issues with waiting periods as well. So a lot of companies have a 7 to 15 to 25 day waiting period. Now you have to also produce pictures of the vehicles. We used to have to do that in the early 90s and 80s. Before I was born, they had to do pictures. I remember driving around with my dad taking pictures with a Polaroid camera of cars and homes that they had to submit in by paper. Dean can attest to that. He remembers these days. But nowadays, you got to submit pictures again. You got to submit the title and the registration, because you got to prove that you're the owner of that vehicle now. And you got to do odometer readings. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And don't buy a fancy car.
Do that
Fancy cars are even worse.
We had to do that in the 90s.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I think, Shelley, you knew this, but I was an insurance underwriter for probably 13 years before I got a mortgage. Yeah.
We had more Polaroid film in our house, and I never knew what it was for. And then now it's like, what's a Polaroid? But yep, that was always in the manila folders with each property. You had to mail it in and get approval on everything.
Crazy.
But the computers were great. It made us faster, but now we're slowing it all down again to verify information, because everybody thought that we could just verify looking online at things. And now there's a lot of other factors that people are looking at. On even our renewals now, they're looking at aerial shots. So like I just showed you of that other home, they're looking at aerial shots now to verify if you've got solar panels, if you've got a pool, if you've got a trampoline in the backyard, if you've got a bunch of debris, like you were doing work and there's, just a mess of wood or trash. They're non-renewing certain policies because, they've got a liability risk. Like Brooke was bringing up earlier, that difference when you're changing over from one owner to another, there's a liability risk on the property. It's called premise liability. If anybody slips and falls on your property, you're responsible for that. So that's why they say can't go. That's why your clients couldn't go into the house until it was
Right.
actually in their name, because the other party would have been responsible. So yeah, it's a fun one.
Stephen, did you say, you may have mentioned this, but how do you guys have any idea how long you're going to be at this 7,000 threshold?
No idea. Like, that just got thrown at us. We have monthly Zooms with our territory leaders and state leaders, and we're always cringe of what the next what next domino is going to fall or shoe's going to drop at this point. But it's just a waiting game at this point. The problem is, with all those carriers leaving the state, it now puts more pressure on us, because we're one of the carriers that's still writing, and to take on that kind of risk and that kind of liability for us as an insurance company makes it more difficult to continue writing at those levels. Because if we're the only game in town with AAA or USAA, and there is a major fire, it's going to wipe people out.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part. They got to limit what they can bring in, which nobody wants to hear. But it's the same as Dean. Dean hates it every 2 weeks when the Fed changes rates again, and then it fluctuates what their interest rates are, because as he knows right now, nobody wants a 7% interest rate.
Nope.
That's why we don't have any houses to sell.
Right. But that's
Yeah.
part of the issue too, is that, the houses that we do have, that we're still short on listings.
Very.
Part of that is we don't have enough new homes, but the side of that is builders aren't building new homes because they can't afford to make any money on these new homes because of the cost to build, because the cost of labor, the cost of gas. They're looking at these, like, I drive past it every day with the farms over here in Poway. That project's taken forever, and the cost of those homes are going to be exorbitant now, that people aren't going to be able to afford them, and they're not going to make the money that they thought they were going to make by building those homes, unfortunately.
Yeah, not to mention all the red tape the builder has to go through.
Oh,
It's 2
100%.
years before they can, even break ground.
Yeah, so they're not willing to go build new homes. So the problem is the price of homes is still going to stay high, as you know, Shelley, because it's just market demand. So all of these factors play into it, where the housing price is going to stay high, the interest rates are going to stay high for the most part, and the insurance costs are going to continue to go up because of those costs of the home. So we're just in this weird kind of tornado of expense at this point. I don't know what the next generation is going to be able to afford or how it's going to work, but something will change. Something will break at some point.
Yep. Sorry, I have the jets going over
Oh,
my
no.
house.
I think at some point you're going to see a lot more commercial buildings get torn down to build housing again too, because we're just running out of space, and we're seeing more and more empty commercial units here.
Yeah.
That there's no point to, have these buildings at this point. They're better off turning them into residential. But then that plays another factor with the condo situation again, if they can get insurance for those types of things. So
Right. Sheesh.
the big domino, it's fun times.
Yeah. Good news, Stephen. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're a ray of sunshine.
Happy to come back in. Yeah, ray of sunshine. I always love that part. But again, we can get things done. There's always a way to find a way to get a policy for you guys. Because again, like I've heard most people say nowadays, it's buy the house. Don't go out there and not buy the property because the interest rate's 7%, or don't buy the property because it's 1.4 million when it could have been 1.2 million. If that's the house you want, go get it. You're going to be there for 30 years. And as Dean knows, how often in your career has somebody kept their first mortgage for the life of that property?
Yeah, I think, well, after this last round of refis and purchases, I think people will be keeping them longer, but most of the time they're, they have a life-changing event. They need money. They want to remodel. They need kids to college, debt consolidation.
Yeah, I think I've heard numbers of usually 4 to 6 times people choose.
Yeah. There's some people I've done 4 or 5 refis for over my career.
Yeah. So don't make that a hesitation on somebody to buy something. It's just part of the game now. Learn the game, play the game.
Yep, that's true. Does anybody have any questions for Stephen? Nope. All right, good. I think you answered them all. That was very, very informative. So thank you so much.
Yeah, anytime.
Thanks for coming on.
Yes, thank you much. I'm going to send you over a property that I'm listing. It's coming live in about 10 days.
Awesome.
I'm curious now to see what it comes. Got me a little nervous in this.
I
And there's
don't want to scare
slopes.
everybody. Yeah, just want to make you guys all prepared. Don't want to scare
Yeah,
everybody.
and everyone should know that. You can always go to Steven if you have
Yep.
any listings coming on or buyers out there that are buying things, and he can look it up and see if it's insurable and get you some rates. So
Absolutely.
they're awesome. I've been using Farmers Wilson Insurance Agency forever. So
And we're happy to have you.
great guys. All right, cool. Thank you again, Steven.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone. And if you have any questions, reach out to Steven. I know he put his information in the chat, or let me know, and I will get you in touch with him.
Perfect.
All right, cool. Everybody have a great day.
See you guys.
See ya.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.